On behalf of Enter, we are pleased to welcome everyone here online and in person, and a special word of thanks to Rabbi Josh Weinberg and to Molly Blumenthal and to the URJ and Artza for hosting the gathering. What is the Peoplehood Coalition? Our Peoplehood Coalition aims to unite North American Jewry around the idea and practice of peoplehood. We are Pied Pipers for the peoplehood paradigm, and like many of you, we seek to broaden its appeal and deepen its day-to-day relevance for member communities and organizations. It is a B2B model with broad criteria for membership and a lean and light organizational footprint. Doron Krakow, the head of the JCC Association of North America, is our founding co-chair, and we're gathering an impressive group of inner circle leadership and a group of true believers to help carry this along. In terms of this masterclass, the stated purpose of our program and this entire masterclass series is to learn and debate new insights from around the Jewish world, examine new data, and explore new pedagogies and educational frameworks. Looking ahead, for those not yet on our mailing list, let us know offline. You can let Scott or me know. You can also check out our new website. I was flashing it at the beginning, peoplehoodcoalition.org, and mark your calendars for the week of June 15th, when we will hold our next masterclass. And now let me turn it over to Rebecca Katz-White, Planning Director at UJA Federation of New York and a member of our Coalition Executive Committee. Thank you, Rebecca.
Amanda. So Peoplehood, as Laura Shaw Frank said, with this coalition's first gathering, connects us across continents, across levels of observance, and across diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds. I would add that it is not only our past, but our present and our future, the sense of family, shared connection, and mutual responsibility, not in spite of our differences, but because of the ways in which the diversity of the Jewish community strengthens peoplehood. Although it's not the topic of conversation today, I feel compelled to mention the crisis unfolding in Israel and how it speaks to the importance of Jewish peoplehood and the need to strengthen it. The extent to which, even where we disagree, that there is value in understanding one another's perspectives and being able to find common ground. UJA Federation, where I have worked for over 10 years, has a bedrock belief in Jewish peoplehood as an operational framework. When it comes to how UJA has embedded peoplehood as an ideology and a practice, I stand on the shoulders of professionals like John Ruskay, who I hope will be joining us by Zoom, and lay leaders like Sandy Antignas, who's here today. My first position at UJA was in a department called the Commission on the Jewish People. When that department was formed, the name and focus of the work were a public acknowledgement of peoplehood as an organizational priority. Over time, peoplehood became embedded in everything at UJA, from how we work with our large delegation of Shlichim and Shinshinim, to young leadership programs, to our strategic thinking and grant making in Israel and elsewhere in the Jewish world. It's both an ethos and a plan of action. In Israel, we're proud to be seeding the field, including investing in peoplehood content in public education. We have also funded and continue to host many delegations of Israelis from different spheres of influence: journalists, educators, parliamentary advisors, and more, bringing them to New York to gain an understanding of Jews and Jewish life outside of Israel, which we believe is another way to strengthen peoplehood. Today, we're fortunate to have three Bonei Amiyut, three builders of peoplehood, speaking to us from in the room and on the Zoom. We will have time for questions after each presenter. If you are on Zoom, feel free to put any questions or comments into the chat at any time, and we will get to them. Our first presenter will be Tracy Frydberg, who is a former advisor at the Diaspora Affairs Ministry and was recently appointed at the Tisch Center for Jewish Dialogue, appointed director of the Tisch Center for Jewish Dialogue at ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People. Tracy is joining us from Israel, and she will offer a bird's eye briefing on this iconic peoplehood institution, its new and expanded exhibits, and its bold plan to become a focal point and platform for dialogue across the Jewish world. After Tracy, we'll turn to a deep dive on data from the camping sector. Nila Rosen, Foundation for Jewish Camps Director of Learning and Research, will brief on FJC's recently released 2022 census. Before coming to FJC, Nila held a wide range of research and evaluation roles in public health and higher education, in addition to evaluation, planning, and implementation for Birthright Israel and multiple Jewish teen engagement initiatives. She's joining us from the Bay Area. Last but not least, we'll hear from Rabbi Josh Weinberg, Vice President for Israel and Reform Zionism at the Union for Reform Judaism. He will share a conversation cloth, an editable and adaptable teaching tool designed for use in a range of informal educational settings here at the URJ, where those of us in the room are seated. Tracy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, the Enter team, for this opportunity and for this convening. It's very exciting to be in a room physically and virtually with so many people who I see as my own mentors and inspiration in this field. We say at ANU that the work of peoplehood, that is the dessert of the Jewish world. It's supposed to be fun and inspirational and positive and exciting and visionary. And so particularly right now, when we're feeling sort of a sense of pain and confusion, to be able to double down in this work and do it with partners around the world is specifically moving and fulfilling for me and what we're doing here. So just a bit of a roadmap of how we're going to use the next 8-ish minutes, and I'm going to try not to speed through it. The high school debater in me tends to come out in these situations, and I just want to get through it all. So we're gonna slow down, but I'm going to start by giving you an overview of ANU and what we're doing. Tap into a little bit of the history and contextualize this moment in time for us here. Then we're going to go and double down on the Tisch Center for Jewish Dialogue, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and give you a few examples of the work, one of which we're actually doing with Enter. And then finally, I will touch on this on the crisis and the implications and role of peoplehood at this particular moment in time. Okay, so let's go back to ANU. ANU reopened its doors in March of 2021 to tell the living and breathing story of the Jewish people. ANU is not just a museum, it is a concept, a set of activities and ideas in Israel and around the Jewish world with the aim of awakening our people to see themselves as a part of a larger story in which all of us have a role in bringing about and creating a future that has enough space for all of us to be a part of. So yes, it is this physical museum and exhibit, but for us and a lot of work that we do, the exhibits that are most interesting to us, that we want to most explore and nurture, are living and breathing Jews, right? Those are our exhibits, those are our target audience. This is actually pretty interesting if you contextualize it within a bit of Israel history, and particularly the history of ANU. So ANU was originally Beit HaTfutzot, the Museum of the Diaspora, and the idea for Beit HaTfutzot, the original museum, came about in 1978. And the idea was, just like many museums, was that there was something that we needed to memorialize, to preserve, right? And that was the dying diaspora. And the idea was that because the diaspora was dead, we had to create a museum in Israel. And it actually started as an archive to remember what was. That was the idea. And then what happens? The diaspora doesn't die. It thrives, it grows, it changes, it evolves. And the question came about in the 90s and early 2000s. Well, do we need this museum at all? If the diaspora is going to continue, why do we need this museum with old models of synagogues? Like, is it even relevant anymore? And they actually considered closing down its doors. A few very influential players, Natan Sharansky being one of them. I think at the time he was Minister of Jerusalem and Diaspora in 2005. They get together and they say, no, we actually have an opportunity to reconceptualize the Diaspora Museum and to make it a museum of the Jewish people. They actually passed a law in the Knesset in 2005 called the Beit HaTfutzot Law, which defines the museum as the national center for Jewish communities in Israel and around the world, which is actually pretty interesting because if you think about it, ANU has a mandate from the government to be a neutral space, a convening space for Jews inside and outside of Israel. And when you think about what are neutral convening spaces for the Jewish people today, not many come to mind. So particularly in this moment, it's interesting to think about the implications this mandate and of this work. And finally, like I said, the museum reopened in 2021, and we engage thousands of Israelis and tourists around the world who come into our doors, in addition to the educational content that we export around the world for educators and for students. Our approach is very simple. The Jewish people are real. We are not a concept. We are physical growing beings that have a past, present, and a future. That peoplehood is supposed to be fun, inspirational, positive. We emphasize celebration, creativity, and renewal. And the door is open and there's a low barrier to entry. So we want as many people as possible to have a peoplehood taste, to be able to relate to some way the story that we are developing here and to see themselves within it. In Israel, this is particularly interesting because in Israel, the mindset is a little bit different. The Israeli mindset is of indifference, right? Israelis don't see themselves necessarily as a part of a larger Jewish people, and this is for a number of historical reasons, right? There's a highway called Kibbutz Galuyot, the ingathering of the exiles, and so the idea for an Israeli to see himself or herself within sort of this larger story is not native to the Israeli, particularly Israeli secular experience. And that we're trying to change. But changing mindsets is challenging, and you have to build a narrative. So our goal is to move Israeli civil society from a mindset of indifference to one of long-term commitment, I would say unconditional love for the Jewish people. And that's going to take a significant amount of time, energy, investment from all of us together, right? This is a global movement that we have to bring about that could truly create a different reality for us moving forward. That's what ANU is doing. Now I'm going to double down on the Tisch Center for Jewish Dialogue. So I entered Tisch a few months ago. Tisch is a physical space at ANU, but it is also a concept and set of activities that we aim will drive all of our work at ANU. We are reimagining what the encounter looks like. So the idea for an encounter started actually with the Charles Bronfman Center, right in the 90s. And the idea was within the context of Israel education, American Jews would meet Israelis. And through that process, they would develop a level of understanding or knowledge about Israel and the Israeli people. Today, the story is different. We say every individual in the Jewish world needs to have some kind of intentional encounter between generations, between tribes, and between those from different countries. And that's the mifgash. And we have to do it intentionally and thoughtfully in a number of different ways. Why? First, there is unique educational value that comes when two Jews come together to have a conversation and learn about the other. That is living, breathing Jewish peoplehood at its best. We talked about at the beginning how the exhibits that we are most interested in are each other. And that's bringing that concept down to life. And second, you know what, I'm going to actually use a story to demonstrate this point. And this is maybe a little bit more conceptual and a little bit harder to put on paper. I had a conversation this week with one of the head Chabad leaders of the Chabad headquarters leaders, and I was trying to pitch him on participating in something that I'll get to later on. And he said, dialogue, what, does it work? Right? That's what a lot of people ask. What's the point of dialogue? And I asked him. I said, is there something inherently holy, inherently divine when a Jew has a conversation with God? He said, of course. It doesn't matter what the language is, what the words are, what that conversation looks like. The fact that a Jew decides to have a conversation with God, there's something spiritual about it. And I said, for us, there's something divine when a Jew has a conversation with another Jew. And that is what we're tapping into today. So that is a goal and an outcome in and of itself, particularly within the current situation. And that's what we're trying to bring about. We've developed a unique in-house methodology, which requires the individual to first have an encounter with themselves, to develop their own Jewish story, and then explain it to someone else. And within that process, we hope that they are able to build the confidence and the capacity to take in the story and the experience of another Jew and think that there's enough space and value in both of us being in the Jewish world today and being a part of creating its future. That's what we're doing at Tisch, and we're piloting several models in a number of different levels. The first is mifgash for the masses. So the idea is that any individual who comes into the museum, any group, could opt into a mifgash as a part of their experience here. And that's let's say a 45-minute to an hour encounter that will just create a little bit of spark in those who are a part of it, a peoplehood moment. The second are more long-term dialogue programs. So at the point where we have 2 encounters, we call that dialogue. And so those would be for unique groups. So for example, a group of rabbinical Orthodox students and rabbinical Reform students going through a 6-part mifgash series. And then the final level is conflict transformation efforts, where we take those who are most devoted in the Jewish world, but have very different perspectives or interpretation of their devotion, bringing them into the same room and trying to see if we can transform some conflict. I'm going to talk about 3 pilots that we're doing right now, and then I'll finish up. So the first is we are doing one pilot with Tnur HaNoar, the youth movements within Israel, where we're bringing youth movements from different groups. So let's say Tzofim and Bnei Akiva together for a series of mifgashim. This is what we're piloting within Israel in the mifgash for the masses model. And so we're not waiting for groups from the Tfutzot to arrive. We think that a lot of this work starts internally. Also, you don't have language barriers, and so that's a pilot that we are doing right now, because a lot of this work, when we talk about sort of building a story, building a long-term story, starts with bridging divides within Israeli civil society, and that can start at a pretty young age. The second is, so I'm an active member of the Peoplehood Coalition in Israel. Some of you might be in our WhatsApp group. Is Barak in the room by any chance?
He's supposed to be. He'll probably walk in the minute you finish.
Okay, so he can tell you more about it. But we had sort of a breakdown in our WhatsApp group where, and some of you might have been following it, where it became so intense around the crisis and what is going here that people were saying, I don't want to be a part of this. What is going on here? And this group, this very diverse group, where really the only thing that we all had in common was that we believe in peoplehood, seemed to be coming to a breaking point. So actually this week we launched a Peoplehood Coalition dialogue process, which Zohar actually, who's on Zoom, participated in this week at ANU. And so every week for the next few weeks, we will be bringing in different members from the coalition to dialogue amongst themselves and to talk about how they see themselves within this crisis, how it makes them feel, where that comes from, what is their story, and more importantly, at the end, to give them a task and sense of mission and double down on peoplehood in this moment, and to say one side wants democracy, the other side wants Jewish sovereignty, but how can Jewish peoplehood be a way through for all of us? And how can all of us as a group, as a community, not only stay together, which in and of itself might be enough, but bring together a vision that allows us all to be a part of the future of Israel that has enough space for all of us. So that's a Peoplehood Coalition mifgash that we're doing. And then finally, and this is the last example that I'll give, the day after Yom Ha'atzmaut, we are bringing together about 10 American Jewish organizational leaders, all under the age of about 40, with 10 current members of the Israeli government, ranging all the way from Shas and Tzionut Dati, all the way to Yesh Atid. These are young rising advisors, and also they have other sort of professional positions in the government, for a 1.5 day dialogue, high intensity experiment, where we're going to bring them into the room and see if they can all meet with each other, speak to each other, and think about what it might look like for us to work together in the future, understanding that each side is very devoted, very connected to moving forward their own processes. And perhaps there's room for us to work together, develop basic principles, and at the very least, start building a relationship and a shared sense of experience. So we're working with Enter as our American partner. Some of you in the room will hopefully be attending or have been invited. So that will be, like I said, we're calling it a workshop, but it's in my head, it's an experiment, and with hopefully interesting and as well as positive results. Finally, and now I will come to an end. I talked about within this crisis, what we're doing with the Peoplehood Coalition is trying to assess mindsets on both sides and give each side a reframing. On one side, they're saying democracy right now in Israel. On the other side, they're saying Jewish sovereignty. And I actually believe that Jewish peoplehood could provide a way out for both sides. Because the reality is, for those in power who are talking about Jewish sovereignty, in order for Israel to remain the nation state of the Jewish people, a Jewish state, it requires the buy-in, the acknowledgement of world Jewry to see Israel as their nation state. And we've seen the red lines of American Jewry in this situation, which is that if Israel ceases to be a democracy in American Jewry's eyes, the future is uncertain. And so in order to maintain Israel as a Jewish sovereignty requires taking notice of how Jews around the world are reacting. And on the Israeli side, Israelis' best partners in moving forward the democracy that they want for Israel is in tapping into seeing themselves as a part of a larger Jewish people who with allies and voices and strength around the world. And so I think once again, Jewish peoplehood is an out for both of us. And so thinking about how to tap into this moment and thinking about Jewish peoplehood, not just as a professional calling or field, but as a movement within both sides, our coalitions working together and spreading out our message. Now is the time to double down, to work harder, to think more creatively, to work more together as not just two coalitions, but one coalition with a shared goal. And move that forward because leadership is going to look different than what it used to. It's not going to be Blaustein and Ben-Gurion. It's going to be a lot more of us in the room. And that's actually pretty exciting and something that I hope to do with all of you. So thank you so much. This was a great opportunity. And I'm here for any questions or comments, concerns.
Okay, so reminder, if you are on Zoom and want to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll open it up in the room, but I want to start just by asking you if you could take a little deeper dive into the change in mindset you're talking about in terms of Israelis. We do a lot, I think many of us in this room work a lot with populations in the US about connecting to Israel, to Israelis, to world Jewry. And we recognize that there's a difference on the Israeli side. So how do you think about what that means, how you accomplish it, whether it has to be addressed differently?
Thank you for the question. So yes, the idea of Jewish peoplehood, of being connected to Jews living outside of Israel, is not necessarily in the infrastructure of Israeli civil society in the way that it is within American Jewry, that sense of responsibility, that sense of being a part of a larger global people. It's not here, right? It was only in the recent years where Israeli schools started learning about Jewish communities post-Holocaust. So integrating it into our Israeli school systems very intentionally, engaging Israeli parents, working within the media so that there are stories not just about when there is an anti-Semitic attack or BDS, though these are intentional interventions that have to happen in a number of different ways, in a different way in which American Jewry is working on the challenges of the day. And it has to happen top to bottom and bottom to top, because it's not within us. I was having a conversation, Arthur Finkelstein in the 90s talked about there's a difference between, there are two kinds of Israelis, one who sees themselves as an Israeli and one who sees themselves first as a Jew. And tapping back into the idea of being Jewish, not just as a concept, a political concept, let's say on the right, but as something that all of us have to tap into, is significant work, a significant educational work. And a part of that also is developing an Israeli Judaism that allows them to think of themselves as Jews and have distinct Jewish identities, which will give them an easier access point into peoplehood.
Hand raised.
Eli Saltzman at the Israel Institute, University of Maryland.
Excellent. Go ahead, Eli.
Maybe can we do Eli a quick point of order after him? Maybe we'll collect 2 or 3 and then give Tracy a chance to.
Yep.
Vakasha.
Thank you so much, Scott. Tracy, it seems like the current events in Israel are not only, but certainly also about how do you define the state of Israel in this hyphenated relationship between Jewish and democratic. So how does the whole project play into that, given the fact that, you know, the kind of the established religion in Israel is not too similar to what the reflection or the landscape looks like here in the United States. Reform Judaism is pretty marginal overall, and the hegemonic group is the ultra-Orthodox, and even what was known at the time as Tzionut Datit or religious Zionism has transitioned and kind of became more and more Hardali or more and more ultra-Orthodox. How do you deal with that, with this pretty difficult landscape for something that is more, I would say, tolerant and more pluralistic by design almost?
Hold the question.
I'm going to add to that another question that was put in the chat, which is from Haley Schulman, which is, how is the ability to connect to a sense of Jewish peoplehood affected by the modern questions of how we define Jewishness and count who is a Jew? I think we're talking about the same big issues.
These are great questions, and a little bit different. I'll talk about who is a Jew. I'll start with that sort of as an example, and a case study. So a lot of these issues, first of all, have created the question of what does it mean to be a state for the Jews, a Jewish state, and the nation state of the Jewish people, and we're getting confused by all of these terms, right? So for example, the image, I sent Amanda an image, but on Israeli Mall there was a sign that said Am Echad, and so when Kulanu Am Echad, and so when the protest, when this is the symbol of the protesters, they're not necessarily referring to like all of us. They're talking about Israelis, right? And when the other side is talking about Achdut, Am Echad, they're talking about something else, also very, very particular. And so we have to build the foundations, which were never built before, that will allow for the state of Israel to remain the nation state of the Jewish people, that will allow it to maintain its unique value proposition, to bring in Jews from around the world and have a sense of purpose and place, and to understand that there's that the Knesset is not our Beit Knesset, and to create spaces where, based on democratic values, where any Jew within Israel can see themselves and have a place within it. So a lot of work has to be done within the Hardal community, within the religious Zionist community, to understand how their ultimate goals in maintaining Israel as a Jewish state requires these pluralistic values as well, and is not threatening to them. So it requires a reframing on top levels, a differentiation of and specification of the language that we're using, and creating infrastructure that maintains these principles, which the infrastructure has never been built. And there have been a lot of technical solutions to who is a Jew, but we've never been able to bring them about. So if some of these changes could actually happen from actually within the religious Zionist camp, from within the Haredi camp as well, and they have been open to compromise in the past, I do see a way out for us on these issues, whether it's who is a Jew or the Kotel or whatever it might be. But it requires an understanding of how, for Israel to remain a Jewish state, it must remain the Jewish nation state. And that requires paying attention to Jews of different backgrounds and perspectives, and that not having an impact on, and that doesn't have an impact on their lives or their set of beliefs. So it's a slow, challenging process, but again, it goes back to changing mindsets, which will allow for the space to more technical solutions to these conceptual challenges.
Can I ask like the annoying organizational type question to say I think this sounds amazing. I think the dialogue is, incredibly important. And what are the issues we're saying? We're not really talking to each other beyond our own, echo chambers and people who already agree with us and social media feeds and whatever. What does success look like? Where do you see it in a year from now or in 5, like at Israel's 80th? we can say, wow, we started this 5 years ago, and now we're sort of, we're in this space here.
Right. So, so one is that sort of on a technical level, that there are these encounters running within the museum, that it's integrated into our work, that our model has been exported around the world. What we're trying to do with our Young Dialogue experiment is create a sort of a new Mariah conference. You remember the Israel Forum from like the 80s to bring that about. And so in a year from now, I would want this group to continue to have grown in numbers. I would want to see us modeling within the museum with engaged members. We call them the very devoted, so leadership within the Jewish world, models for how we would solve who was a Jew, and actually doing that with players within the Israeli government to be able to find solutions, and to be bringing in the concepts that we are building here and have them be used throughout the field. For not just being in dialogue with each other, but building partnerships and relationships, and reimagining how we have a little bit more empathy and, I would say, love for Jews of different perspectives. That's a little bit harder to evaluate. So technically speaking, that you would have these workshops and programs and methodology that would be used, and sort of more conceptually over time, being able to move the needle a little bit in the direction of these sort of broader goals that we're all trying to push forward.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Now going to move over to Nila from the Foundation for Jewish Camp.
Thank you, Tracy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tracy. I have not yet been to ANU, and I am now so excited to come and visit. And thank you, Scott and Amanda and Enter and everyone in the room. I'm very honored and humbled to be here in such esteemed company. I hope you are all enjoying your lunch, and I look forward to a future lunch with all of you. I'm FJC's Director of Research and Learning, and I'm located in the Bay Area. My research background is in positive youth development, and my training is in epidemiology, and Jewish Camp is in my soul. I'm not sure I can fully read the full Zoom room and the full room, but I'd love to see a show of hands of how many of you went to Jewish Camp or have someone in your family in Jewish Camp. It was definitely me. I went to Jewish Camp. I was a counselor, a trip leader, taking kids into, backpacking. And I think just to connect to what Tracy shared with us, camp is this intentional encounter. It is a utopic and liminal space where we can imagine the world we want to see, and we can come together to learn about each other. And I'm going to share with you the trends that are going on today in Jewish Camp. And I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to share my screen with all of you. And I believe Scott has passed around the room the latest census report. So for those of you in the room, for those of you in the Zoom room, Scott might be so kind as to put the link in the chat for us, and so we will go ahead from there. For those of you who do not know FJC, I want to share a little bit about who we are, and I will get this started. Here we go. Can you see both me and the screen now?
Perfect.
Thumbs up. Okay, great. So the Foundation for Jewish Camp is a public 501(c)(3). We're a nonprofit that's been around for 25 years, and we advocate for the field of Jewish Camp with the help of many of the funders who are here with us today. We catalyze field growth by developing initiatives that help camp to thrive and to innovate. And we also collect data across the field and gather a bird's eye view across North America. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. My goals are to share the current trends in Jewish Camp, to share what we know about Jewish peoplehood within the diverse tapestry of our camp field, and then to have a discussion on what we can do to ensure that Jewish camps remain a thriving place for peoplehood. So our sources of learning, there's a trends report. This picture was actually taken at one of our flagship programs called Cornerstone. You can see this was even during the pandemic, everyone's wearing masks, where we were creating a learning on how to create campfires and the meaning and soul behind campfires. This is quite a beautiful moment. So I'm going to highlight some of the trends that we see today. So here are some of the positive trends. We see that overnight and day camp enrollment is up, and that retention of campers is up. These are great trends, and we are not quite at the pre-pandemic recovery levels, but we hope to see those in 2023. On the staff side, we see that international staff has increased. The visas became easier to get, and we are really have been able to have COVID restrictions lifted in 2022. We also see that 75% of camps increased staff salaries, and almost 80% of overnight camps and almost 50% of our day camps now have one mesh professional on staff. And the addition of these mesh professionals is the result of a visionary grant by a foundation to support the mental, emotional, social, and spiritual health of campers and staff. We now have over 100 camps participating, and we receive funding. Each of these camps receives funding for qualified mental health professionals to work with campers and staff each summer. In terms of international camp staff specifically, we have seen a bounce back of both Israeli staff and international staff from around the world. You will see here that Israeli staff is about 10% of the staff population, and staff from other countries, which are Jewish and non-Jewish staff, are about 15%. And really, this staff, where we see this exchange, is in our overnight camps. We'd love to see the day camp side grow as well. There are, however, some challenges and trends to watch. We know that staff retention is low, making recruitment and training more difficult for camps. Young people have a variety of options these days. We need to do whatever it takes to make sure that camps are a viable summer option for our staff. We know that camp tuition is increasing. There was a 4% increase in 2022. And we believe that it's expected to increase by 6 to 8% in 2023. More financial aid was requested than ever before, and we feel that this will continue to grow. And we don't want any families to be priced out of Jewish camp. We see that overnight camp expenses increased, and there's also a high turnover of professional staff post-pandemic. And we'd like to keep everyone and provide the professional development and provide ways for professionals to stay in this field and sustain. These are the current priorities. This is on the last page of the report. There are a lot of needs for camps, but it does show you that here, these camps are asking for operation and infrastructure support, and also the staffing, recruitment, hiring, and retention, as I've talked about. So what does Jewish peoplehood look like at Jewish camp? And I do want to pause for just a moment. I want to say, Scott asked me to do this presentation, and I was in New York at the time, and I said, "Oh, definitely." And I'm sorry I won't be in the room with you. And I wanted to go a little bit deeper, so I'm going to share with you some data that I uncovered just for this presentation. We haven't released it yet, like we have the report. Before I do, if anyone has a question about any of the data that I shared, I'm happy to take a pause, or we'll save that for the end. Anyone have a burning question? All right. If not, I'm going to continue here. So
All new and secret things. So thank you for bringing something new and unpublished.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These sources of learning are from our 2022 Satisfaction Insight Survey and our 2022 Camper Satisfaction Insight Survey. These are completed by 3,500 staff across North America and 10,000 families across North America. And this is across 80 of our 300 camps. So these are really rich data sources for us. So this table does have a lot of data. I hope it's big enough for those of you in the room. First, I wanted you to see the makeup of Jewish overnight camps. So what you see here, we asked families to identify their country of origin. So with 10,000 families responding, this table represents the 33% of families with one parent or guardian who was born in one of the following countries. So you can really see the diverse tapestry here. I looked at the experiences of these groups and found very high satisfaction, positive sense of belonging, and positive impact on Jewish identity. In the right column, you will see the percentage of families who reported that camp created an atmosphere where their child is proud to be Jewish and created the feeling that they are connected to the Jewish people and the larger Jewish community. There is more good news. We also found that 92% of families with US-born parents also feel that camp connected their child to the Jewish people and the larger Jewish community. And Scott, this is something that I believe I added to our instruments after an initial conversation and dialogue with Enter. So I also did a qualitative dive into our data because I wanted you to hear from the families and the campers themselves. So here is one of the quotes. "I love the number of Israeli staff at camp. It enriches the experience for the kids to connect with them and learn about Israel. Alon is incredible. Love him." These are the kinds of comments we see over and over from families. And there is still room to grow. Not every camp has Israeli staff coming, and we are always looking to grow that number. From another family, one of the things that we love, and I took this directly, I did not capitalize, the parent wrote this, about first session is the chalutzim. These camper and working adults add so much to the spirit and warmth of camp. Also, the addition of more foreign staff was a wonderful change, such a great opportunity for our children to be exposed to so many other cultures, and for the foreign staff, many of whom aren't Jewish, to have the opportunity to get to know Jewish American culture. They then return home to their countries with a positive experience. Now, I want to turn to our overnight camp staff, and there are about 25,000 staff each summer. This sample is 3,500, and I want to give you a sense of who they are. About 50% of them are in college. 63% are age 18 to 22. About 60% are female. 50% were prior campers at their camp. And about 80% identify as Jewish. And there are other important identities here. Identifying as LGBTQ is 20%, and identifying as a person of color, 6% of our staff. And here are our countries of origin. So you will see the 70% from the US and the other 30% from across the world, with 9% coming from Israel. Here's another data trend, and there's a lot going on this slide, but I want you to see the light blue line here, and this shows trends over time. And what I want to point out is that with the light blue line, camps have had a positive impact on creating a positive Jewish identity, and this did not fall post-pandemic and still remains strong. So we asked staff to describe a positive a meaningful Jewish experience at camp. And here are some of the responses from staff at North American camps across the continent. One meaningful Jewish experience I had was when I was talking to an Israeli staff and they helped me connect more to Israel. It was very meaningful to me because after camp, I went to Israel and it helped me learn more about it. And I am also hoping to take a gap year in Israel. It also works the other way. I'm from Israel, so experiencing the Jewish culture outside of Israel was such an interesting and meaningful experience for me. And then this touches on also what we heard earlier, the importance of dialogue. The session on the Israel-Palestine conflict during Israel Day was an important acknowledgement of the state of our world and was an incredibly important conversation to facilitate for campers and to give them the tools to better understand and discuss the situation. I'm looking forward to more dialogue with the Tisch Center. Definitely think there is room here for all of our camps to be engaging in this way, creating these meaningful experiences. And this really personifies camp here. Havdalah is so soulful and meaningful. And during Havdalah, I feel so strongly connected to my friends and the people of camp. If there's one moment where I just absolutely know how much camp means to me and how special it is, it's Havdalah. And then doing Rikud to Israeli music in onesies. So this really personifies the fun of camp and the spirit, the celebration, and the connection that we are also talking about in terms of peoplehood. I want to just share a little bit of our FJC initiative. And the goals of this initiative are to increase the number of international Jewish young adults working in North American Jewish overnight camps. We also are supporting these international staff with training and financial assistance to travel and increased opportunities for educational and social activity between international Jewish communities and networks across North American Jewish camps. We are currently working with ORT. I think Barbara is in the room, and we are always open to partnerships to grow this program and are really excited about this program. We also launched the Israeli American Camper Initiative with funding and support from a California donor. FJC is piloting this new incentive program for families in California, Oregon, and Washington with at least one Israeli-born parent. And first-time overnight campers are receiving incentive grants to attend overnight camp. We know the costs are high. This is a great incentive. And we have enough funding for 150 families this year, which is quite exciting. And again, we're always open to scaling, growing, and expanding this program. We also have our Russian-speaking Jewish outreach and engagement initiative. This started in 2013, and it's to expand opportunities for campers from Russian-speaking families in North America to experience Jewish overnight summer camp. And we currently work with overnight and day camps, community partners to provide summer camp, family camp, and year-round engagement opportunities to Russian-speaking families. So we are interested in just this last quote just really gives me chills. Being able to chant Torah in front of the whole camp was meaningful to me because it's something I love to do. And being able to do it in front of people from all over the US and the world who were still Jewish made me feel like there were people everywhere who could accept me. And that just brings chills down my spine and personifies everything about camp and Jewish peoplehood that I could bring together. So we're interested in this dialogue. We're interested in hearing from you and thinking innovatively about what we can do to ensure that Jewish camp remains a thriving place for Jewish peoplehood. We are interested in your partnership, your dialogue, your ongoing discourse today and always, and your ideas. And just want to thank you for your time and interest and our future lunch together. My email's here. You can always reach out. And thank you, Scott, and onward.
Okay, so I know we have several questions in the room already. And so remember those on Zoom, please put them in the chat. And I just want to start by saying it's, okay, if you want to just raise your hands, but we actually cannot, can you unshare so then we can see the people if they've raised their hand or just want to speak up? I just want to start by saying it's great to hear such good news from camp, because for many of us who worked either directly or tangentially with camp, we know how difficult the last years have been. So the good news, even aside from the Peoplehood piece, which is also amazing, is just wonderful to hear. So I know that we have three. We're going to do lightning round. We're going to hear 3 questions in the room, more if there are, and then we will do a lightning round on Zoom. So I'm going to start, I think, okay, so I'm going to just start at the end and we'll work our way around. Okay, so for those who couldn't hear, to summarize the 2 questions, it's about the significant increase in Jewish identity data from 2015 to 2016. And then the second question is about addressing mental health issues, which we know are very significant for kids at camp. What is being done beyond the MESH program? Stacey. Oh, Barbara also. Okay.
I'll just
We
say,
have like 20 questions.
I'm sorry, I'll be
It's okay.
quick. Hi, Nila. Thank you for the shout out to OR. We're really excited to have the opportunity to bring some of our global students to camp and to experience it, and for the campers to meet them. And my question is really about what are you doing between summers to keep the connection, or like what happens next? I mean, camp, anyone who's gone to camp, it's a very powerful experience. We know it's lasting. Campers often go year after year, but just longer term or bigger picture, and especially with the international component, with the peoplehood piece, what's happening, or how can we sort of keep that idea alive after summer?
Okay, so question number 2 is keeping the connection alive in between summers, especially as it relates to the peoplehood piece and students and staff coming from overseas. Stacey?
It's funny, my question is similar to Barbara's, but specifically, Nila, thank you for all of your information, specifically around the camper counselor relationship. I think there's a lot that can be like uncovered in terms of like peeling back the onion throughout the year. Are there any programs, or is there any room for discussion around programs to not only keep it alive, but really, really embracing it, even if it's like through visits or connections or, intergenerational stuff? I think is super powerful, and I've seen it actually. So I'm wondering if anything has been like sort of put in place.
Okay, so strengthening the camper-counselor relationship in between summers. Did you get yours? Is already
asked Ruben's
okay,
question.
and Josh?
And Jerome.
But again, offering my thanks for the presentation. Great material. I'm going to be bringing it back to our camp people. We have in the Reform Movement 15 camps, and also Israel Immersives, and myself, I go on faculty every summer as well and teach Israel and Zionism peoplehood at camp. Where for so many, like their first encounter with Israel and Israelis, actually. But my question is about the shlichim is oftentimes, and I think you may have put a quote about it, so when the Israeli shlichim come to camp and they see a whole different world of Judaism that they don't necessarily experience in Israel growing up, and we often say that they sometimes come as Israelis and return as Jews. That is incredible. So I'm wondering if there's any sort of measurable data that is tracking where they end up after that experience. How many return as returning shlichim, and then how many go on to incorporate somehow that experience into their lives and their activity and careers and so on.
And if you're not tracking it, we'll take Josh's question as a suggestion as well for the next.
Very
segment.
so.
Jerome,
It's just, I'm wondering if you're tracking any data on Mizrahi campers, not Jews of color broadly, but specifically Mizrahi campers.
I don't know if you heard that is data being tracked on Mizrahi campers, not within the broader data collection on Jews of color, but specifically looking at campers who identify as Mizrahi.
And Duran.
Hi, yeah, thanks again. Just quickly, one of the things you touched on is about 82% of staff not being Jewish, and I know in some camps that's even, or 82% being Jewish, so that's a significant number. Yeah, that's an important inversion.
Wow.
But only 82% of staff being Jewish, and in some camps I know that's far less, and it's going outside of the sort of the traditional maintenance and kitchen staff type roles, and you're getting into program staff and funk staff at day camps and overnight camps. And I'm curious whether you have more information on how that plays out in terms of conveying Jewish identity, in terms of the reliance on people who are not Jewish, as well as whether the numbers of Jewish educators, rabbis, Jewishly literate, Jewishly engaged staff, and sort of what that capacity is and how it plays out in terms of serving the broader community.
So the last question, if you couldn't hear, it has to do with how Jewish identity is being inculcated as the number of staff, including program staff who are not Jewish, is growing at many camps.
And I would add just on top of that, also the availability of Jewish educators.
And the availability of Jewish educators, rabbis, and others who would be among the purveyors of that kind of identity.
Given the time, Nila, and everyone's piling on, and some of the questions I think are also comments and things I imagine you're going to think about and carry forward. Maybe we should just finish and go around with those online. Do you mind collecting now that you have 6 comments? We'll see if anyone online. I don't like leaving people online out of the room. And then when you're done, we'll pivot to Josh in the last segment. Is that okay? If I can. Evan, I see Evan Hochberg from JFK.
Yeah. Thank you. So to piggyback on, I think it was Josh's question, I'd be interested in knowing a sense of how many camps are actually doing real sort of dialogue, mifgash programs between, I guess, as staffers from Israel, other countries, and the US, and how many, and to what extent are other camps really just sort of relying on the sort of organic interactions that are happening between all of those Jews from different places.
Anyone else online? Good. That's all right. We people are listening, engaged. I see facial expressions that are suggesting everyone's very engaged. Thank you, Nila, please.
Absolutely. I'm gonna start from where we just left off with Evan. Thank you for such wonderful questions, and I feel the engagement. So this question about what are we doing to promote dialogue with an intentional dialogue and versus the organic potential one-on-one interactions. And you know, this is something that I do not know. We have not captured that within every camp to ask that question. And it's a great question, and it's a worthy exploration. And from this conversation, we would be looking to partner with organizations, maybe the Tisch Center for Dialogue or others, on crafting things that we can provide to camps as resources for that intentional engagement versus the things that are already happening that are wonderful and organic. So that's an area of potential expansion and innovation, and really open for dialogue on that with everyone. I also want to say that we would like to be encouraging that also within the day camp spaces. So that is also an area for growth for us and the whole field as well. I'm going to go to the question on the data on Mizrahi campers. That is something that we do collect. And for anyone who's really interested in a deeper dive, I'm happy to engage with you. I think we do collect that both within our camper families and within our staff. And so the experiences of those groups are very important to us. And we want to see the cultures celebrated and the experiences robust. I think there was also a question on how, if at all, we are tracking the experiences of Israelis post-camp and all staff post-camp, but really the international staff. And I think that is a fabulous endeavor that I would love to partake in as another research project. We have not been doing that, and I think it is a very, very worthy endeavor. Again, open to ideas and exploration there. I also want.
Noted. We'll be coming. Several people at the table will be coming back to you.
Great. I also wanted to remark on the comment about year-round engagement, and year-round engagement is one of our 3 pillars and strategies with FJC. We see camps as spaces and organizations that can be lifelong and year-round. And so we are always looking to foster more programming, more connection year-round. And we have some camps that are models for doing this. They have started B'nai Mitzvah programs. They have retreats all year. They have connections. And quite honestly, many camps are just in recovery mode from the pandemic. So we expect and hope to see a lot of growth in this area after the full recovery this summer from COVID, and are always interested in providing camps with partners and supports to do that kind of year-round engagement. There was also a question about that dip from 2015, really early on. I have to say that it was that was way before my time. I've only been at FJC for the past 3 years, so I will explore what that was, and I'm happy to get back to you. I'm really curious, because I'm curious about the data, and I do know that once we see things in the data, and that's why I shared with you the trends about staff and recruitment. And that's really one of the conversations that I want to engage in is, how we create robust staff pipelines, because when we see the trends, that's when we want to act on those trends. So I know we see that there was a recovery of the identity. It's because we took some kind of action, but I'm not sure what, and we'll want to talk with you about what was going on that year. So I'm trying to see if I got to every comment and every question.
We're gonna give you a pass because you did a lot. You presented a lot of data. You're listening. You're doing a lot of listening and absorbing, which I appreciate. These meetings, those who talk to us about the agenda, it's not just to showcase new data and trends, but it's to try to forge some interaction and professional dialogue. And you've been really just amazing. Thank you, Nila. We're gonna take the last. I'll turn it back to Rebecca. We'll do our last segment.
Okay, so we are now going to head to our final segment.
Okay, well, anyway, thank you so much for the opportunity to present. Thank you, Scott, and thanks everybody for being here, and thanks also to Molly for all of the setup and background. I think that the first 2 presentations were really perfect segues into what we want to do, what we want to showcase here. One, in the question of dialogues that Tracy raised, and then 2 with Nila, she left me just like the perfect segue in saying, what kind of resources could we provide to people at camp? And this is, we're going to share with you an actual resource, and maybe we can even have a few minutes to get into it with one another a little bit, and discuss some of these things, and geek out over some Jewish texts and stuff. I think, which is what I like to do, and that's fun. So just 2 sort of premises, one, in that we are, steadily approaching this milestone landmark anniversary of the State of Israel, reaching its 75th year anniversary. And so much has been, talked about, and what does it mean for us, and what, how should we celebrate? And I want it to be more than a moment of celebration. Yes, we'll have the parades and the concerts and the parties and the, 850,000 mission trips that are coming, in April, and sort of, landing in the country right now, oh, Shelley, what is going on here? Coming all to a protest on Kaplan Street or not. I wanted to use this opportunity to re-examine the relationship between Israel and the diaspora. I was thinking a lot about on the eve of the establishment of the state of Israel. Even as Ben Gurion was sort of rushing to we have to declare right now 5th day of the month of ER May 14th, whatever, like we have to do it today, cannot wait, even though there may have been some unanswered questions that were still floating around, like what are the borders going to be, or what is how is religion going to work in the Jewish state, or other things. Even the name wasn't a given towards the end, and it sort of established. I was thinking about one of the proposed names was Yehuda, actually being one of the ancient kingdoms, and they kind of came to an obvious conclusion, like, okay, it can't be Yehuda because what would we call the citizens? Yehudim. Well, of course, not all citizens are Yehudim or Jews, and not all Jews are citizens, of course. So that one doesn't kind of work, but it kind of set into motion the relationship of like Israel would be in the center and the diaspora would be dispersed around the world, with its job to either come to the center or to support it in any sort of way. And we can look at where the Jewish community was in 1948, and that sort of supporting Israel financially, politically, all those things were, was really the most unifying common goal. If you look at in terms of how much money was raised and the sentiments, of course there were detractors, but and so 75 years later, what does that look like now? I mean, what should it look like? What do we want? How do we want to be proactive about shaping our joint future as Jewish people, essentially, and which I thought was appropriate to talk about in context of peoplehood. We look back at the past over 75 years, what has worked, okay, and what no longer works today, and requires a paradigm shift, which, like, we as Jewish professionals, we love paradigm shifts. Okay, like the paradigms are shifting all over the place, and it's really fun. But for real, like what does it look like? And if you look at the largest community in outside of Israel, being North America, the old sort of like, okay, come make Aliyah, like there's always a healthy group going each year, but by and large, the main Jewish community is here, and they're not making Aliyah, and they're living in this we could call it a dialogue or in a relationship or a connection, and how that's going. The second premise is that, especially now, and I think Rebecca, you mentioned this in your introduction, when we're looking at the political, just massive crisis that we're in. I think we're in a watershed moment right now, the Israeli political situation. Regardless of how you feel about any particular judicial reform that's taking place, or the constitutional crisis, or who you may have voted for in the last election, the question was raised to me that I've been losing sleep. One of the questions I've been losing sleep over is, what is actually the diaspora's role in this moment? Some of my Israeli friends are like, including some prominent members of Knesset, are saying to me, use your American power. Like, this is the time to do it. As if I had like a button to press, and like Biden would, say, I'm like, okay, how do you see that playing out? And like, we just saw, 15 of the 19 largest federations do a fly-in day for 24 hours, and all this, and a lot of ink has been spilled on the op-ed pages of newspapers saying, we as diaspora Jews, we're concerned, or we're not concerned. This is great, And what should the role be there? Regardless of like whether we've served in the army or vote or pay taxes or not. And I think it's an opportunity once like things die down, should they die down quickly? Like it's a moment for examination of this relationship. So that's the short introduction to say that we've created two resources to talk about it. One, which we have and we can pass out to anyone who would like it, is an actual curriculum. It's a 10-part series. It was created with British Israeli educator and artist, a guy called Rabbi Greengrass, who many of you I'm sure know and have worked with in the past. And he's very creative and has created several things, starting from like the hugging and wrestling of like 2004 or 3, Moving up now to, they just put a book out called For the Sake of Argument. But before he did that, he created this methodology called the 4 Hatikva questions. These are 4 questions inspired by some holiday coming up soon, and used in the penultimate line of Hatikva, where if you look at the issues that we are facing now, we can broadly categorize them into 4 sort of groups of issues, one having to do with security, one having to do with freedom of expression, freedom of speech, one having to do with tribal, ethnic, or even national identity, and the other having to do with geography. Okay, and if you apply some Hebrew terminology to each of those, and to our friends on Zoom, we will add a link as, what can you do? The hard copies are here in the room. But next time, and like I'll show you in a second. Yeah, that's the next one. Okay. Yeah, I'm door number 2. There's like amazing swag being passed out right now. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. That it all boils down to the questions of lihiyot, chofshi, be'artzenu. Right? What does it mean to be? There's a question of security. What does it mean to be a nation or a people? What does it mean to be free, actually? And what does it mean to be in our land? And we're using that as a lens to approach some of the most significant and fundamental questions that we're facing at this moment, right? So, for instance, if we can look at the current constitutional crisis, I'm calling it, or current, judicial overhaul, judicial reforms, whatever, through this lens. Okay, what does it mean to be a Jewish state? What does it mean to be how does freedom play into all of this stuff? This is a major one. Okay, we look at what's going on in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, and to say, okay, what is our land? What is not our land? How do we play that? And it offers a framework with the curriculum touches on basically 2 main issues: that of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and that of religion and state issues, as I sort of commissioned it with our reform movement lens. So that's one, and I'm happy to discuss that with you and to see if you'd be interested in acquiring this sort of for your organization or for your learners. The nice thing about it, I think, and I feel like I'm doing an infomercial a little bit for it, but the nice thing about it is that it can have varying levels of sophistication, and can also be done in different kinds of time, frame or timing. So you could do it over a 10-week semester's course, for like an adult education or like a confirmation class, or you could do it over a weekend retreat somewhere together, or with staff at camp on a few evenings at night. It can really be malleable, and the important point is using the methodology to try and use this. Okay,
All right, quick
that's one.
call.
Number 2.
Number 2, I'm going to tell Amanda if she can queue up. We have a digital version.
Yes.
If you could share
You can
screen.
share
I'm going to
this.
share. You guys have to clear in front of you. I'm going to ask you to look communally. With the
Okay,
person
you
next
need to
you.
get a poster.
And I'm going to tweak our script, Josh. And if we're running short on time.
Oh, thanks for that.
If
Okay.
you could just really explain what is the mapat,
What's that?
what is the conversation clause? That's one.
Yeah.
And 2, why has it been so well received at Z3?
Okay.
Why is it working in these
Right.
gatherings? Today is mostly a showcase. We're not actually doing the full.
Okay. Oh yeah. Depending on how much time. So this is a project that we came together with the Jewish Agency. My friends at Makom Israel, just mentioned Rabbi Josh Schwartz and Shelley Kedar, who we came together and said, let's use this year, the 75th year, and I see it just starting. It's like I feel like we can't miss this moment, but this is the beginning of the year, and we're going to do it from here on out. If anyone doesn't get one, this is it's like practice for holding your Haggadah over your Seder plate and the whole, it's very convenient. And then, okay, let's use the tools that we have as Jews and as Jewish educators to try and have these conversations. And we imagine really literally sitting around a table. So we thought let's create a tablecloth that goes on the table. As you can see, the design is made to be one person sitting opposite another. So if we were going to do this out, imagine okay, there's a crazy concept, a Beit Midrash, okay, like a study house, where the learners are sitting across the table from one another, okay, and they can look at the various texts as they're. I happen to love the design and studying the text. And what we did is using these. We didn't invent the concept of using a proof text and then offering commentary, okay. That has been done before in the Jewish world, okay? Like if you've heard of like the Talmud or something like that, okay, that's been a proven concept. But what we do want is really to allow places to capture the voices of our participants or our members or of Jews, okay? To say the critical part of this is to say, what do you think about this and what does it inspire you to think? And that is like the idea, okay, the concept is what will come out of that is a collection of writings and of, dare I say, literature that will help forge the relationship going forward. That's the concept, that's the idea. It doesn't always happen this, and we've done this in a few, separate instances. Sometimes people just sat across the table and just talk, which dayenu, okay, we can say, like, that's good in and of itself. And say, oh yeah, we didn't get any of these texts, but we had a really powerful conversation, on topic. And sometimes you get to one text, and sometimes you can come back to it week after week as you shake off the tablecloth and, this is cheesy, reset the table for how you might want to use it. So just a word about the text is that we picked 9 texts. The earliest is like from the book of Numbers, okay, from the Torah, asking this sort of famous question, basically, rephrasing in modern Hebrew, like, are your brothers to go out to war and we'll stay here, which is from, Reuven and Gad and the half of the tribe of Manasseh who stay on the other side of the Jordan, okay, then we're going to stay here at arm's length and we'll go. And that, it is so relevant in my humble opinion. And moving on to, if you've never checked out Shimon Ravidovich, okay, I'm like a huge, like chassid of, I'm a huge follower of Ravidovich. It's kind of a niche market here, I would say, and I'm kind of a dork in that way. But he had this correspondence. He sort of broke away from Ahad Ha'am in the 20s and then the 30s, and he founded the Jewish Studies Department in Brandeis University in Boston in the 1950s and wrote a book called Bavel Yerushalayim, okay, Jerusalem and Bavel, sort of looking at the ancient polarities of the two major Jewish communities in the world and how they interacted one with another. And to saying that, diaspora, dare I say, North America and Israel are the Yerushalayim Bavel, but it's like a 900-page book in very, very difficult Hebrew, in which maybe 17 people in the world have read. And Professor David Myers from UCLA wrote a book about that book called Between Jew and Arab, which, again, this is like I feel like we're an in crowd here. So Ravidovich comes out and says, like, okay, something quite progressive, saying we ought to be co-creators, that this diaspora and Israel are two that are one. And as much as Israel has progressed and sort of possibly gone beyond the sort of original notion of what we call in Hebrew shlilat hagolah, or the rejection or the negation of the diaspora, to see us on equal footing is leaves some Israelis uneasy, because they go by the Ahad Ha'am model. Essentially, if you look at text number 1, it's on there. I didn't pass around these texts. Here, I'm going to give these to you as actual hard copies, so you can see. And then with this, I'll just sum up right now. That Ahad Ha'am is essentially saying, okay, look, he says, I'll just read this last line. He says, from this center, the spirit of Judaism will radiate to the great circumference, to all the communities of the diaspora, to inspire them with new life and to preserve the overall unity of our people. Okay, and imagine that bicycle wheel, okay, with a center, a focus, and, you know, emanating rays going out to these diaspora communities. Okay. And I want to raise the question, you know, is that something we want to challenge and to try to, you know, rethink of or reimagine a new kind of imagery of what this like, you know, what this could look like. Rabbi Dovich said, no, don't think of the circle, think of the ellipse with two, it's actually not, it's two focuses is the proper word. And to sum up, I think this follows in nicely with what, you know, the entire theme of the day and what we're talking about in how we try and redefine the relationship of what it means for us to be part of a people and to have these two massive communities, one of whom lives in a modern nation state of the Jewish people and one of whom lives in Jewish communities and sort of spread out, and what that could and should look like. And so we brought different ideas, different people ranging. Tracy mentioned, you know, Blaustein Ben Gurion, and we included that sort of famous correspondence as one of the texts to say, okay, maybe that was one voice in the 1950s. Okay, what would it look like today? So I just want to say that this can be made available to you as a resource to take to your various spaces as a way to kick off like a year of exploration, of learning, of challenging one another, and hopefully coming out stronger on the other end.
Thank you, Yasher Koch. We are, because we're a little short on time.
I'll email out the source sheet and people can do.
We're going to email the source sheet. We're going to put the virtual mapat, the PDF that Amanda was just showing, and that everyone here around the table is looking at. It's actually very clever. It got everyone off their cell phones for a minute. But they're all spread out here. We don't have a video of the Z3 project. So several of us were in the Palo Alto, and it was done to rave reviews. Josh, you and the others with you from the Sochnut, right, and from other. You did it to great rave reviews. No video of that. He has offered, may not know it yet, but he has offered to take your questions offline, and if people want to use it, adopt it, ask questions, contribute to it. We'll do the round of questions that we didn't get to do now offline, if that's all right, Josh. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
We're at sort of at our appointed hour. I'm like 1/8 Yeke, so I want to stick, and people also have other things to do. I want to just say one more word, and I'll turn to Rebecca to close the meeting. I want to thank everyone for coming. We have someone who's going to give us. I asked him for a few minutes. We're going to make it 30 seconds or a minute if you can. About a certain, we had a very special catering order today for those in the room to inject a little bit of like peoplehood into the space. And Ruben Shimonov will just say a word, hopefully whet the appetite of those not in the room. The week of June 15th, we're gonna have another masterclass. We'll try to do it every quarter. It's an ambitious to do 3 components every time. We'll take your offline input. I think more is better, but if you think we should do less, you know, let us know. Before I turn to Ruben, I just want to circle back 14 months. Some of us gathered in a different setting at Laura's office. And in addition to these 3 incredible presentations, Nila on camping, Tracy on Anu, the museum, but also the mindset shift that's that it represents, and then Josh's educational frameworks. A lot of the interaction here reminded me of something Laura suggested or proposed as a goal for this coalition, as we're calling it. So I'm going to just turn to her. I hope you can hear her.
Yeah, I'll talk very loud. Can you hear me online? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
They're nodding.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I was late. Laura Schafrank. I'm the director of the Contemporary Jewish Life Department at ABC. And what I had said back in January 2022 is that we often think that there's no necessity for another Jewish organization. There are too many Jewish organizations. Why do we need to add another one? And I want to argue that bringing people together around the issue of peoplehood is actually not injecting another organization. It's actually refining the organizations that we have and focusing us in a much more strategic way than we possibly can do when we're all running in our own directions and not talking to each other. So I'm going to encourage us to think expansively about the notion of not injecting yet another unnecessary organization, but rather to think about the power of that organization to bring the rest of us.
Beautifully put. Amen. Thank you. Ruben, why are we eating what we were eating today? Come on.
Okay.
Indeed, and that's peoplehood.
Yeah,
Thank you.
on one point I'll try to say, so Scott and I were speaking quite recently, as we do every couple of months, and spoke for over an hour. And then towards the end of that conversation, usually our conversations are a little bit up in the clouds, but an action item manifested from that conversation, which is that we should also engage our senses in celebrating the beautiful tapestry mosaic of the Jewish people. Food can either be something a bit, superficial when people talk about, oh, Sephardic Mizrahi cultures and their yummy food. If it's used like that, then I'm not for it. But if it is harnessed to then provide a platform for deeper story sharing and memories and connections to the past and the future, then food can be, it's also, I think, a very Jewish thing, can be used as a very powerful community building and educational tool. So the food today represents a bit of that beautiful mosaic. We had lahmacun, which is popular. It's an interesting variation of it. Usually it's in kind of smaller circular discs, but it's still a very delicious bread with spiced meat, a little bit tangy. This is particularly among Syrian Jews a very popular maza dish. Then we had Moroccan carrot salad. We had baklawa, which is also throughout Jewish communities of West Asia and North Africa used. And I think the last thing that I'll say is a lot of this has now culminated in the food of Israel. It's this tiny place that we've spoken a lot about today is an area where a lot of these tiles have come together to create kind of a new reality, one that can at best honor that past, but then also make something new out of it. And I do believe that there is such a thing as Israeli cuisine, and it is a combination of all of these diasporic communities coming together. So this is Sephardi and Mizrahi food, it's also Israeli food, and it's Jewish food.
It came from paprika based in Great Neck in the Laos.
Yes.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Okay,
I'll let you go.
final thank you to Tracy, to Nila, to Josh for all the great content, to all of you on Zoom and in the room for really wonderful conversation, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you.